outside services. I want y'all to think about that. If you'd feel more comfortable and maybe thought people would be more comfortable, we could set up chairs out here like we did back in the fall, and everybody spread out. We could set a sound system up out there and have a outside service, which I think if we done that, we probably need to start about 9:30 probably. It wouldn't be so hot, but just give that a thought, leave it open, and then we'll see. Here's what I've been looking at, that because you see the cases going every day, there's cases, but you look at the hospitalizations and the deaths, those numbers are going down dramatically. There's not near as many people dying from this, not near as many people being put in the hospital. So Georgia's kind of the one that we're looking at right now, seeing how all this goes, because we was one of the first ones to open back up. So we'll watch those numbers, and they've been a steady decline for several weeks now. Even though the cases are up, the hospitalizations are down, and the deaths are down, even in Whitfield and Murray. The cases have dramatically went up, but the hospitalizations hadn't increased much at all, nor has the deaths. Yeah, that's right. They're testing a whole lot more people, and a lot of people's had this and didn't even know it. A lot of people's had it and did know it, as we know. I've noted 2 different people dying. That's associated with one that used to come here. One of our church members' father passed away from this. So it is a deadly deal. But we're just going to test the waters, kind of ease our way back into this. Hopefully we won't have to shut back down. But I'm excited to be back. And I was telling somebody the other day, I hope it ain't business as usual. I hope we learn something from this. For me, it ain't going to be business as usual. God's really spoke to my heart in some of this. Troy's going to come up and lead us in a word of prayer. Then I'm going to turn it over to Brother Randy, and then we'll go a little bit farther. But I am so glad to see everybody here today. And I know as we ease our way back into this, our numbers are going to be increasing, and we'll be safe. We'll have everything y'all need. If some of y'all don't have masks, we'll have them here. We've got hand sanitizer everywhere. We'll use those restrooms for now, these 2 doors, and we'll ease our way back into it. But we'll have everything here to make this as safe as possible. If you don't want to wear a mask, you don't have to. I know it might get uncomfortable wearing a mask for 30 or 40 minutes. And, 40 minutes singing, 10 minutes preaching, that could be tough. Come on, Troy.
Well, let me say good morning. I'll say a little word here too. Our offering is going to be in the buckets, the kids' buckets. There's one here and one back there at the back. So when you leave or whenever you want to, drop your offering in those buckets. And hope everybody's safe, and we'll go to the Lord in prayer. Our kind, gracious Heavenly Father, just thank you for this time that we've gathered here to lift up your name, Lord, and ask you to be with us, Lord. Lord, just put a head of protection around us as we carry on this service today. Lord, we can't thank you enough for allowing us to be back in thy house where we can worship you in spirit and truth as a group of believers, Lord. Lord, just be with Brother Donald as he brings the message this morning. Be with Randy as he brings the singing. And we ask these in Christ Jesus' name. Amen.
This may be the longest time, for sure, that I've gone without going to church. And probably, well, for sure, as long as I can remember. My mom and dad were out of church when I was born, and went through a period of time there that they didn't go, but I was too young to remember that. And then when I was about 6 years old, started school, my mom rededicated her life to the Lord, and they started singing with the Cool Springs Quartet, and I was in church 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, singing at revivals and all that. So it's been a strange time to me. I'm glad to be in the house of God today with you. if you would, stand with us. Let's sing. You can sing with your mask on. It ain't going to hurt nothing. It ain't going to make no difference. And if we just sing Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fear relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been that 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Praise God, 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 praise God. Amen. Man, this house has been quiet too long, so you can be seated. When I was a little boy, one of the earliest memories of my life is this is going to be kind of strange to you, but one of the earliest things I remember was sitting in my daddy's lap watching Friday Night Fights. I don't know if y'all ever remember that show, but I looked it up. It quit in the 60s, so I was really little. I was born in 56, so I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old maybe, and they had the Friday Night Fights. They'd have 2 or 3 underling fights, people that you didn't never heard of, and some of them I never heard of anyway. Even now, thinking back on it stuff and everything. Of course, I didn't know who none of them was really, but it was a time that me and my dad could spend together and bond together over a manly thing, I guess, or whatever. And just little, I remember, boy, I thought I was Sonny Liston or somebody. I would bounce around. They'd have them fights. I was ready to fight. Me and him scuffle and stuff. But way they do, you know, the way they do it them at a and I was thinking about this week, and this song came to my mind that we're fixing to do. And they'd have them underling cards, and then they'd have a more contender fight, you know, and they'd have like the champ would come, and they'd have this old scrub that they brought up, you know, usually, and he'd just wire him out. But they'd introduce the guy that was going to be the contender, you know, and they'd say, over in his corner, we've got in the certain color shorts and trunks, they call them, and then they'd introduce the champ, you know, and they'd say how many fights he'd won and how many knockouts he'd had, and what a great champion he was. Listen, I serve a great champion that has never lost a battle. He's never even lost a round. The greatest champion of all time. Listen, as we try to sing Champion of Love. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? I want to introduce to you, in this corner of the good and the right, stands a champion robed in white. His height exceeds the heavens, his weight outweighs the world, his reach reaches everywhere, his age is evermore. He is higher than the highest, greater than the great. No one will ever take his crown away. And he's more mighty than the mightiest. He reigns from above. He's the all-time, undisputed, undefeated champion of love. He left his hometown to enter this arena, to raise his hands in victory for me. An angry crowd crucified this king who wore their crown, and they gladly watched the champion going down. But I will never count him out, for I'm a witness of the day he rose to retain the title, champion of love. He is higher than the highest, greater than the great. No one will ever take his crown away. And he's more mighty than the mightiest. He reigns from above. He's the all-time, undisputed, undefeated champion of love, of love. One of the songs we were working on just before we came into this time, this separation that we've had, goes round and round and around and around and around. And for 2 weeks after this started, keep me safe till a storm passes by. Just kept going over and over. And many times, you know, the storms of life would come. I had to say, Lord, keep me safe till a storm passes by. My brother-in-law and I sang that song. Donnie Owens, some of you know him. He played instruments of all. Anytime you get him, he'll play. Owens is over there in Fort Payne to Alabama group. You know, that's his cousin. He's just like him. Play anything. We did that song together lots of times at church, and especially around home we gathered. He'd get on the piano. We had a bad wreck. Well, he was out of the car. The train, his own car hung up on the track. The train hit the car, and the car hit him. And he was in a coma for 41 days. But the whole time he was in there, just every little bit, I could hear him playing, me and him singing, "Keep me safe till the storm passes by." And they called and said, "Donnie woke up, and he's going to be okay." I said, "Thank you, Lord. Keep him safe till the storm passes by." And listen, the last verse of that song says, "One of these days we'll be in a place where no storm clouds will ever come. No storm clouds will ever rise. And maybe some of your loved ones will pass away due to this deal here. But something's going to get us all. And we'll be in a place someday where there'll be no more storm clouds ever darken the sky. Allah for a time. Well, we'll all be together. We won't have to have no separation. We won't have no worry. Good to see you.
Amen. I'm going to read a couple verses, and then Brother David's going to play a song. I'll never forget when this started. If God ever spoke to me and gave me a message, He gave me this, and I'm going to preach it out. I wasn't going to preach this. But I mean, here lately, God's just opened His Word up to me, and I mean, just showing me stuff. I sat down this week, and I'd be working. I'm going to preach this. It was dead as a doornail. I'm going to preach this. God said, "Go ahead." It's what I felt like He told me, but it ain't what I want. And I preached this at home when this first started. And God showed me this. And I guess of any message I've ever preached in my life, this message I feel like came straight from heaven. Matthew 10, I'm going to read a couple of verses out of Matthew and then some out of Luke and then one out of Psalms. Matthew 10:29. Many of y'all have heard this. Charlotte Hooper used to sing this song, "Consider the Lilies." And this scripture will stand out to you. Matthew 10:29. "Are not two sparrows sold for a farthing? And one of them shall not fall into the ground without your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered." Why don't you think about that? Every hair on your head numbered. Every little bird out there, God knows it. I'll say more about that in a minute. Luke 12, verse 6 and 7. Luke 12, verse 6 and 7. And God showed me something in this I'd never saw. And I preached this, studied it, taught it. That's why the Word of God's alive. You'll never exhaust it. You can preach it over and over and over, and God still show you stuff. Luke 12, verse 6. "Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 farthings? And not one of them is forgotten before God. But even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore. Ye are of more value than many sparrows. Then he says this over in Psalms 84. We'll read down about 4 verses. Psalms 84:1. Boy, this here fits. What in the world? Ain't that amazing? Preaching on birds. And God let one fly in. Ain't that amazing? He'll work his way out. You know what I was wanting to do this morning? I wanted to go find me a bird to bring in here. He'll be all right. He'll work his way out if he hits me. He keeps trying. He'll get out of here in a minute. Ain't that amazing? I wanted to go find a bird and bring it in here this morning. And God sent one. I didn't know where I could get one. He'll work his way out. You're going the wrong way, buddy. Look at verse 1. He'll get out of here. How amiable, how lovely are thy tabernacles, O Lord of hosts. My soul longeth, yea, even fainteth, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh crieth out for the living God. Yea, the sparrow hath found a house, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young, even thine altars. O Lord of hosts, my King and my God, blessed are they that dwell in the house in thy house. They will still be praising thee. Selah. You know, when this first hit, everybody just tore up, scared to death. These little things here, when they would get into the tabernacle, they could not kill them. If they built their nest, and a while ago, that one there went and landed up here in the little blue lights. And they'd build their little nest up in the top of the tabernacle. And God said, you better leave them things alone. Don't you tear their nest down. Don't you kill them. Because these things will live in the tabernacle. They'll be here when you're not even here. Ain't that amazing? We've probably had some birds. We've had birds in here a lot. But here's what I want to preach. And I'll say more about this in a minute. And David's going to play a song. The birds are still singing. We're all scared to death. We're all just worried. Everybody just worried what we're going to do. Them little old birds, they ain't missed a meal. They still know God's going to take care of them. And bless God, the next day after this pandemic started, they're still singing. This morning I walked out and got in my truck and went up to eat breakfast, which I hadn't done in months. And I listened, and the birds were still singing. And God said, you know what? I'm going to take care of them little birds. But you're a whole lot more important than birds are. Play this, David, and then I'll preach.
Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows and long for heaven's home. When Jesus is my portion,
Amen. Ain't that amazing? I just said that if God's ever given me a message, He give me this one. And then He let a bird fly in the house of God. Ain't that amazing? You couldn't have had a better pictorial illustration. You know what God's telling us here today? It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I was going to preach on the birds this morning. God sent us one. Birds are still singing. We got hope and trust and faith during this time. I want to give you this, and then I'll preach. In the summer of 1979, I don't remember this, but there's a little English village in Broughton where a little sparrow come in church service. The preacher shut the church service down, sent everybody home, and went and got a marksman to come into the church, into the little St. Helens Parish, and they killed the bird. And it went all over the world. And people criticized him and criticized that church because of what I just read out of Psalms 84. God made it okay for the birds to come and to dwell in the tabernacle. But then I come across this on this song that we just played, His Eyes on the Sparrow. And if any of y'all's ever heard this song, watch Billy Graham. Ethel Waters used to sing this song. My words, effortlessly. She'd just stand up and the words just flowed off of her. She had a touch of God on her. I mean, she just oozed God out of her. But here's where this song comes from. A person by the name of Sevilla Martin, the wife of a Baptist preacher. She said that in 1905, her and her husband were sojourning in Elmira, New York. And they wanted to go visit Mr. and Mrs. Doolittle, who were friends, they're deep friends. And Mrs. Doolittle had been bedridden for over 20 years. Her husband had a crippling disease, and he went back and forth to work in a wheelchair. And despite all of their afflictions, this little couple, they served God, and they happily served God. And they thought, well, we're going to visit the Doolittles, and we don't want to impose on them. I mean, she may not even want to talk to us. And said when they went in there, they were just filled with exuberance and brightness and happiness. And they said, what's your secret to this? How do you endure this disease that you've got? How does your husband endure this disease that you got? And here's what Miss Doolittle told them. Said, if his eye is on the sparrow, then I know he watches me. She went home and she wrote that song. And now what is it, 215 years, or 115, 115 years later, we're still singing it. His eye is on the sparrow. And here's what I want to preach this morning. I want you to think about this. As we look at this, fear. Have you ever thought about fear? The definition of fear. You know, some fear is good. You want a kid to learn, don't touch the stove. You know, how many of y'all's ever had to let a kid touch the stove or touch something hot because you had to teach them? And once they touch it, then they know not to touch that thing again. Any of y'all ever been there? You know, now they've invented these little things you can stick in and plug in. When some of us was kids, they didn't have those things, did they? You stick something in the plug in and you might get shocked or whatever. Some fear is good, but then there's a fear that it just takes over us. And I looked this word fear up, and it means an unpleasant, often strong emotion. And an awareness of danger, an anxious concern, a reason for alarm. One time, I love this. I come across this little story. The heart of a mouse. A mouse was playing under the bushes when a cat spotted it and chased it all through the fields. The mouse was so scared to death that he called out to his fairy godmother and said, "Can you turn me into a cat?" So she did. So the mouse became a cat. One day, the same cat was going through the prairie when a dog spotted it and chased it all over the woods. So the cat was scared to death and called out to fairy godmother and said, "Can you make me into a dog?" So she did. One day the dog was out looking for food when it came up on a tiger. And the tiger got after it. The dog was scared to death and ran to the fairy godmother and said, "Hey, can you turn me into a tiger?" And she did. And the tiger was out doing his thing. And he seen a person that had a gun and was getting ready to shoot the tiger. And the tiger said, "Can you turn me into a hunter?" And the fairy godmother said this, "I've transformed you from a mouse to a cat. I've transformed you from a cat to a dog. I've transformed you from a dog to a tiger. And now you want me to transfer you into a native hunter. I can make you whatever you wish, but if your heart remains the heart of a mouse, you'll always live in fear." Folks, it's the heart. God said, "I did not give you a spirit of fear, but of sound mind and of power." Of power. Folks, you listen to me. You and I don't got to live in fear. You know, he said, "I've given but of power and of love and of a sound mind." God reprimands our fears. He said, "Don't be fearful." But then he gives us a remedy: power and love and of a sound mind. You know, we're using a sound mind. We've got hand sanitizer here. We've got mask here. We're doing everything that we can. We're trying to operate out of love. We're trying to operate out of a sound mind. But you know what, folks? Ultimately, we just got to trust God. And we've got to believe in God. We've got to believe that if God cares for these little birds and these little sparrows and everything else, that He is going to take care of us. Charles Spurgeon, who I love reading some of Charles Spurgeon's stuff. He was a wordologist. I mean, words. He was just eloquent in his words. He said this about fear: "Anxiety does not empty tomorrow of its sorrows, but only empties today of its strength. Cares are numerous. Therefore, let your prayers be as numerous. Turn everything that is a care into a prayer." The very essence of anxious care is the imagining that we are wiser than God, and the thrusting of ourselves into His place to do for Him which we dream He either cannot or will not do. Boy, that's good, ain't it? Let your cares drive you to God. "I shall not mind if you have many of them, if each one of them drives you to God." Ain't that something? That's why, America has realized that we're not as strong as the world realized that we ain't in as control as we thought we have. We've watched these things, and I love sports. I'm here to tell you right now, I love sports. I love football. I love some of these things. But we found out that we can live without sports, hadn't we? We found out that we can live without a lot of stuff. I'm going to tell you something. I'm getting ready to do a thing later on Facebook, on social media, and I want to ask people how this has changed their life for the good. I'm going to tell you something. God's done something out of this. Sure, our churches have been empty. But I'm here to tell you this, folks. Preaching hadn't been. Witnessing for God hadn't been. There's been more gospel preached over the world during these past 2 months than there's ever been. Because when people went to Facebook and when people went to other things, all of a sudden there's people out there that don't darken the doors of a church, that they will tune you in in and they will listen. I see it. I have more people that never go to church tune in and listen to me on social media, and they say for every time that you get a like on Facebook, say if you get 100 likes, you probably had 250 likes. There's 2.5 for everything that you do see. There's 2.5 of them out there that you don't even see. And the gospel has been preached like never before. God can take something bad and do something good with it. Talking about fear. I want you to think about this. One's comparison and findings. Is that little bird still in here? Maybe he'll work his way out before we're done. If not, James, I guess you'll have to catch him. That falls under some kind of deacon thing, don't it, Troy? Are not two sparrows sold for a farthing? And one of them shall not fall to the ground without your Father, but the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear ye not, therefore, you are more value. Are not, and then here's what God showed me. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 farthings? And not one of them is forgotten. He said up there earlier, though, he said 2 sparrows are sold for 1 farthing. But here he says that 5 of them sold for 2 farthings. As I studied this recently, and God showed me that the day after this, I think it's around May 13th, something like March 13th, our church is shut down all over the United States. I got up that next morning after reading this scripture, and I walked outside, and the birds was just singing away. And God told me, He said, Donald, you don't got to fear. Every night when I go to bed, I pray for my family. I pray for the church. I pray for that little gal of mine, little old 7-year-old girl. I said, God, please protect her. God, protect her. Don't let nothing happen to her. Don't let nothing happen to our family. God, put your hand over our church. And God said, Donald, I'm in control. If I care for them little birds, and folks, just so happen, right outside my house, I got one of them big old evergreen trees, some kind of green, funky tree. Wind blowed that thing over one time. Me and David went out there and hooked a truck to it, and we pulled that thing back over, and we anchored that thing back down, and that thing's still leaning a little bit, but it took, and then that little old bird on the south end of front of my house, is on that tree, them little birds, they'll go in there, and this spring, all of a sudden there's 2, I call them catbirds. I don't know what they are. They big old funky looking birds about like that. There's 2 of them things. They, a mom and a daddy, they put them a little nest in there, and every day I'd go out and I'd see her sitting up on top of that power pole in front of my house. And here all around us, people's losing their jobs. All around us, people's dying. All around us, people are sick, and the churches are shutting down, and all this stuff. And I'd look up every day. I'd go out there and be working in my yard and go getting in my truck, and that little old bird, she'd meet me on top of that power pole, and she'd just singing away. And I'd watch her, Troy, and she'd go, and boy, I'd see her. I told kids, I said, come here, baby, I want you to watch this. And she'd come, and she'd have a little worm in her mouth. See, you know what God's doing? That little bird, she don't know where she's going to get her next meal. She don't know where she's going to find her next thing to feed them little babies that's in their nest. But God worked it out. Some of us, we went out, and you'll go mow your yard, and you know what happens when you mow your yard? You bear all that stuff that's under the grass, and them little worms, they'll come up, and them little insects will come up, and them little birds, they'll swoop down. I went out and had some dozing done, and I noticed when I had my dozing done that them birds, they just landed everywhere, because all of a sudden all them insects and all them birds that's under the ground, they come up, and them worms and bugs, and them little birds will come, and they'll get them up, and they'll take them to their nest. Them birds don't know how that's going to work out. And you know what I started doing? When I'd walk outside my house, we to carry our scraps and put them back in the woods. Friday night, I was looking outside, and I started taking my scraps out to the behind my house and putting them down in the woods. And I looked, and there come old raccoon. That old raccoon, I told Denise, I said, honey, come here and look. And there's old raccoon. He come walking down through there, and you know what? God's taking care of the raccoons. I just think I'm throwing out my scraps, and them old raccoons just coming out there and eating them. I've got pictures of them. I got about 6 or 8 of them things. I've got deer that's coming out there. About hit one of them this morning in front of my house. But them old birds, I'd tell kids, I said, watch that. But here's what I was going to tell you I do. The other day I had a bunch of popcorn, and instead of taking them things out, Troy, you know what? Something just spoke to me. Throw that stuff out right here. Next thing you know, I woke up next morning, walk out, and all that stuff's gone. Tony, something, them birds is getting that stuff. See, folks, you listen to me. God's in control. God knows what He's doing. Them birds didn't have no idea that I'm going to throw them popcorn out. Them birds don't have no idea that Donald Cantrell's going to go out and throw them scraps tomorrow. You know what? Their job's just to do their thing. Their job's just to get up in the morning and sing. Just get up in the morning and be happy. And bless God, I found out that every day since March the 13th or March the 15th, the birds are still singing. They're still singing their song. You know why they're still singing their song? God is still in control. He's got His hands wrapped around this. I don't. This thing's bigger than me. This thing's smarter than me. This thing's a whole lot deadlier than any of us, but God's got His hands wrapped around this thing. You know what they said over in the Old Testament? That what they done, they would have to go up and they'd have to take these little old sparrows. When a man had leprosy, he'd have to go get him a little sparrow. You know what? That was the cheapest bird that you could get. A sparrow was the cheapest thing you could get. It was the sacrifice for the poor. It's what Mary and Joseph offered up when they had to go and take Jesus after He had been born that 8th day and took Him down and they offered up little turtle doves. They was poor. Mary and Joseph was poor. I thank God that God knows how to take care of the poor. I'm glad that God's got a plan for the poor. And that little old leper, what He'd do, and boy, I want y'all to get this. Boy, God showed me this. God showed me this. He'd take him two little sparrows. It'd take him 2 little turtle doves. It'd take him 2 little old birds, and you could get them for a farthing. You know what a farthing was? It was a half of a penny. It was a half of a cent. I mean, it was nothing. Anybody can find a half a cent. You can walk around outside and find a penny laying there. I pick them up. I've taught kids, and I said, pick them things up. Them things add up. Pick them up. Boy, you'll watch her, and she'll be going and picking them things up. I said, what are you doing, baby? She said, I'm saving these pennies, and she does. But old leper, he get leprosy, and maybe he's been healed, and that old leper's been healed of his leprosy. What he'd do, he'd march down to the house of God, and he'd take him 2 little old turtle doves. God showed me this. Boy, I'm here to tell you. That he'd take one of them, Troy, and he'd hand them both to the priest. That old priest, Tony, he'd take one of them little old turtle doves and he'd hold it under running water. And he'd slit that thing's throat. And the blood would just flow out of that old turtle dove. I mean, that thing was dead as dead could be. But you know what that old priest would do with that second one? He'd take that thing over to the door of the tabernacle. And he'd take that thing and he'd let him go. And bless God, he's a sinking because that other one died. Way back yonder, about 2,000 years ago, there's one that died for me. And he shed his blood for me. And you ask me why I'm happy. Bless God, I can tell you why. You ask me why I'm singing. Because somebody died for me. And I'm here to tell you, my friend, the church can sing today. We got something to sing about today. Bless God, the birds are still singing. The church is still singing. Christians can still be singing. You know why? Because He shed His blood for me. God showed me that. Them things were so cheap that if you bought 4 of them, they'd throw in the 5th one. They wouldn't have no value. They said, if you go ahead and just buy 4, if you'll give a whole penny, we'll just give you the 5th one. Any of y'all ever remember having them old puppies? They always call one of them the run of the litter. One time when I was a kid, we had our old dog. Her name was Susie. I'll never forget her. She was an old mutt collie. Well, she had a litter of puppies. And Tony, you'd probably remember some of them old, I think their name was Barkers. There's some boys, they all played ball with us. Their daddy coached and stuff. They had moved into Murray County. Well, I went to school one day, and I'd picked out the run of the litter. And I come home, and Mama gave my dog away. I said, Mama, where's my dog? I named him Duke, after that old guy on Gomer Pyle, old Duke. And I said, Mama, where's my dog? She said, I gave it to Mr. and Miss Parker. And I said, oh, no, you didn't. I walked right down 4th Avenue, went 1 block up the road on the right side of the road, and I knocked on that door, and Mr. Barker come to the door, and I said, I want my dog. He said, your mama give me that dog. I said, that dog's my dog. I want my dog. And old Mr. Barker, he knew I was serious. I was probably crying. I don't remember. But he gave me my old dog back, and that dog lived about 18, 19 years. He lived forever. My mama swears I shot him one day out hunting. I don't know, somebody shot him, but if I shot him, it was accidentally, and he got between me and the squirrel, I guess. I don't know. But old Duke, he lived about 18 or 19 years. Bless God, folks, I'm here to tell you there ain't nothing good about Donald Cantrell. There's a day way back yonder, and God looked down and he seen a bunch of runts. God seen some that nobody didn't see nothing, no value in. God said, I'm going to die for him. I'm going to die for that one right there. And folks, I'm here to tell you right now, one thing that God has showed me out of all this stuff that's went on, bless God, I know why I'm singing. I know why God put his call on me way back yonder in 1980, and it's to stand up and preach the Word of God. Sometimes we get sidetracked. Sometimes we get this way and we get that way. But bless God, I'm singing because I'm a sinner saved by the grace of God. And I'm here today because I'm a sinner that was saved by the grace of God. And I'm preaching today because my sins has been washed away. And bless God, I'm going to sing today, and I'm going to sing tomorrow, and I'm going to sing next year. Bless God, we've all got something to sing about, don't we? You know what? I went out the other day, and I was mowing, and that tree I was telling you about, I looked down. I just planted a bunch of grass in my front yard. And that, boy, it's beautiful. It's just green, luscious green. I ain't never planted grass like that. It's beautiful. And I looked down. There's one of them little babies that fell out of that nest. And it was dead. You know what popped in my mind? God knows. He said, can one of them fall to the ground? And I don't know. That's the first thing God showed me. The creator of this universe, the one that made it all, he knew that little bird had fell to the ground and it had died. You know what else he says? The very hairs on your head are numbered. Any of y'all ever tried to count your hair? The other day, me and Kinsley, she hadn't been out at all. She's scared to death. She's getting better, but Ollie's open. I told her, I said, baby, Ollie's is open. She had been to that in Chattanooga back at Christmas. I took her up there, and man, that store's running over with toys. And I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. I said, I've always tried to get her out and do a little stuff. She don't do it. I said, Poppy's going to take you to Ollie's. You want to go? Yes, I do. Where's my mask? And we went to Ollie's. Well, the other day I took her to Walmart. That's about the only place she's been. She wears her mask. And I was paying, and I bent down, and she said, Poppy, you got a gray hair. And she had reached up, and I said, honey, I got a head full of gray hair, but I had a gray eyebrow. I said, quit. There's people everywhere. You can't pluck my eyebrows out here in the Walmart. You know, the average person has 100,000 strands of hair. That red-headed people have about 90,000. Brunettes have about 105,000. But I'm going to tell you this much. When 437 fell out of my Antonio, I didn't know. God did. God did. God cares about you. And you ain't in this thing alone. If you get anything out of what Donald Cantrell's preaching today, listen to me. We do what we can. We have a sound mind. We do what we can. We do the best that we can. We use our mask. We use our hand sanitizer. But we don't live in fear because we're trusting somebody that's greater than us. And what you and I have got to do, we can't live in fear, but we stand up and sing our song. And we live our life. And we trust God to take care of us and trust God to take care of our church. And you know what? God saved probably more people the last 2 months and has been saved in the United States than forever. You know why? Because the lost world is scared to death. They don't know where to turn to. Drugs don't help them during this time. Alcohol don't help them during this time. Hand sanitizer don't help them during this time. They need something stronger than hand sanitizer to deal with their fear, and we've got to answer. It's Jesus Christ, and He'll save their soul. And folks, I'll close with this. The other day, about 2 months ago, if some of y'all remember this young lady, we prayed for her hard, and her little daughter had died. We even took up money here. Her name was Shanna. We took up money, and I took it up to him up at NICU here in Dalton. And her little baby died. And I had to preach her that little baby's funeral. And that mama and Daddy, they wasn't married. And she told me, said, "Preacher, when we get married, I want you to marry us." This was years ago, several years ago. Well, I got a call. And they said, "Don, they've had a new baby." And they said, "We don't want this baby. We want to be married. Will you marry us?" And I said, "I sure will." Well, later on, I got a call, and she said, "Don, Jared's been out of town. He just come back from Florida, and we need to get married today." I said, "Well, I'm on the way to take my baby, Kinsley, to the doctor's office, but I can meet you." And she said, "Well, we just want to do it. We've got everything." And she said, "Where can we meet?" And I said, "Tractor Supply." We pulled in Tractor Supply, pulled in on the south side Tractor Supply. Tony, she got out. She had gloves on. She had a mask on. He got out of his truck. He stood here. She stood over there. She wasn't going to let him know where around her. And all I done, I said, "Do y'all want to get married?" And they said, "Yes, we do." And I said a few things. She said, "I do." And he said, "I do." I said, "Y'all are married?" I said, "You can kiss the bride." She said, "He ain't kissing me." And I got in my truck, and she got in her car, and he got in his truck, and bless God, they married. I'd never married nobody at Track Supply, and I'd never married nobody where they didn't hug each other and kiss each other. We're living in different times, but you know what? God showed them we're living in different times, but you know what? He's the same of God. He's still doing what He's always done, even though our lives, and here's something that I love, and I read when all this first started. You know what they said? It's not always the strongest that survives. It's not always the smartest that survives. It's the one that can adapt. And church has been wonderful at adapting. We'll adapt. We'll get through this. We'll make our way through it. It may never get back to business as usual, and that might be a good thing. Randy, come, let's have a song. Lord, we just want you to know we love you. God, I pray that you'll take this as simple as it was, and you'll do something with it. Touch our hearts. God, I love you. I love these dear folks. Lord, I pray that you'll bless us as we ease our way back into this. God, let us not live in fear. Let us sing our song. God, let us learn as we go home tonight and we stand out on our porch or out in our yard and we hear them little birds singing. God, as that storm comes here tonight or the rain comes, God, I know them birds are still going to be singing. God, I pray that you'll let us just trust you. I pray this in Jesus' name. Look up here at me as music plays. I want to say this. I see he's back flying again. The day after those tornadoes hit over there, boy, we had it rough, didn't we? We had the pandemic, school shut down. You know, we got several of our teens here. Future teens, maybe. Teens. A lot of people's kind of forgot about these kids. These kids has had it rough. You know, we always say we don't like school, but I guarantee you most of them would have paid to have been able to go back to school because their life got turned upside down too. And we've all had to adapt. We've all had to adjust. But I'll never forget when that tornado hit. I got out that next morning and I rode around. And I'd talked to Brother Tony on the phone, and then I'd went around. This morning I rode up through Norton Bridge Road out there, out the road Marston's Pool Zone. And I seen all that devastation. Then I come back up the Fuller's Chapel Road and just seen just devastation. And I done this on purpose. I rolled my window down, Tony. Right there where just total destruction. And I stopped my truck and I rolled my window down. And them birds were still singing. I can hear them out there right now. They're still singing. Folks, we can shut down and we can live in fear, or we can be like these birds. We can get up in the morning and we can trust God. And we can believe that He's going to take care of us. Tonight, walk out on your porch. Walk outside before you go to bed, before it gets total dark, and just listen. Next morning after that tornadoes hit, I rode all around and tried to see all that devastation. And I listened, and bless God, them birds were still singing. And you know what? They're going to sing tonight. And they're going to sing tomorrow. And they're going to keep on singing. And when Jesus Christ comes back, you know why? They're not in control. Their job's to do their thing and to sing their song. And you and I need to be singing our song. What number, Randy? Let's stand. If you need to come pray, come. If you don't want to pray, where you at? Just pray. If you want to come and pray, you can. Keep on singing your song. Keep on having joy and trust in God. Just keep on singing your song. Sing on. Amen, Don. Amen. Brother Don's praying. Some of y'all just want to pray with him. You don't have to. If you just want to pray. Amen. Amen. Just sing your song.